start recording.
Got it. I was muted. Fine.
Alright, yeah, so this is gonna start.
Thanks for coming to our TED Talk.
Alright, yeah, so I kind of made notes on this. I divided into sections. So I figured maybe what we can do is I can discuss this section and then we can open up to like there a bit of like discussion or questions and answers kind of part. It's discuss that section, kind of just on that section. Next thing. So like the main topics are just like tanking basics, learning to tank, the skills you'd use, classes, like a bit of breakdown between classes, sets, tanking trials versus tanking dungeons, and then exercise. Let's talk about exercises and test survivability and learning mechanics, and then like alright, so maybe I'll just start discussing basics.
Sounds good.
So, there's always a shortage of tanks, like especially in endgame. I've been doing a lot of endgame playing and always a shortage. Sometimes you even go into Craiglorn, and if you have Ebanon, you get invited to group. So, definitely if you want to get into endgame content, but don't want to put in the time into learning DPS or healing, it's definitely an option. Or even just have a backup from proper, and they're short a tank you can swap kind of thing. But, so it also helps you become a better DPS and healer. Become more aware of mechanics, because tanking is very mechanic heavy. To get aware of mechanics easier, and as well with healing, you'll know what a tank needs because you've experienced it yourself. Certain attack that it heals after, or certain resource heavy content where you need weird resources or synergies. It's also a good place to lead trials from. It's very, very easy to lead a trial when the boss is facing you and you know exactly what mechanics he's doing. So it's easy to call them out. So a few things just to discuss about how tanking works. It's very important that you turn the boss around. You have to be very experienced. You have to be aware of mechanics. So at times you may have to kind of just stand there and hold block and see what the boss will do in certain rotation. Be like, okay, he's doing a heavy now. He's gonna do a few attacks before he does another heavy. It's important to have at least 35k health, especially if you're doing trials. You may want 40 plus. Generally, you don't want more than 50, because the healers will not be happy. So it means they're gonna have to spam heals on you to keep you alive at certain points if you have too much health. A lot of attacks are percent based damage, but there are some attacks that are based off a direct number damage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you want a good health. You also want a good stamina pool. Generally, when I make a tank, I'll try and aim for 20k stamina plus. And then, like 15 to 20k mag. 35 to 45k damage. For your... Another goal I usually have when I make a tank is I try and aim for high magicka recovery. Because that means if healer goes down, or if you're taking a lot of damage, you can kind of spam your heal. Because a lot of them are magicka based. Spamming that will keep you alive. You don't have to depend on a healer. If you're on Argonia, it's still a very good choice to go magicka recovery pod with potion cooldown on your enchants. So I'm talking about your jewelry enchants. If you are gonna ever change the trait on it, change it to infused. Normally I go infused. I know a bunch of decks that will go trade, and a few that will go. You also want to aim for fairly high resistance, so 27 to 30,000 resistance buffed. So that'll be with your 5280 skills, hardened armor, something that gives you that resistance. I also made notes on all this, so I'll post the notes section in addition to that.
Yeah, so when you're talking about the health range, because you can set up for this set of armor and this set of weapons and this monster set, and your attributes are you have 40k, but now you need to wear this set of armor, so that's going to change it plus or minus maybe 3 or 4k, depending on which armor sets you're swapping out. So do you just kind of play that by ear, or?
Yeah, generally speaking, we'll try and aim for about 35k if you're wearing non-Ebon. So if you're wearing 2 different sets, and either of them is Ebon, and you're at 35k, you're usually good. Because then if you're wearing Ebon, you go up to about 38. And so forth. And then along with, if you're gonna change your enchants, jewelry, healthy to something else, then you'll have to take into account as well that. But that also depends on the sets, because Alkosh will give you stamina versus max health. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
So I have a question related to that, and that is, so what's a good template to use? In other words, if we use the build in PvE builds, let's just say, and use the attribute point stats there, and then what? You use glyphs and or your members to adjust what you need? So if you simply take a drop in health, you take a drop in mag, you take a drop in stam, depending on your set, right?
Yeah, so normally what I'll do is, I'll kind of look at what gear. I usually use, either Ebon and Alkosh or Yoma and Alkosh as kind of like a base. Because that's the most common setup. It would be either Ebon Alkosh or, currently at least, for tanking trials. So normally I use that as my base, and I'll aim for 35k health. Actually about 36k health when I'm wearing Yoma, Alkosh. And then Stam I'll kind of take into account. I'll remember that Alkosh is a Stam set. So I usually change the enchants in my jewelry. So I will kind of look at, when I'm like respecting my attributes, I'll look at those 2 things and aim for at least 20k stamp in the end after it reduced. So my stamp would be about 23k before I change the jewels.
And so would you recommend like the same, whether it be triune, whether it be harmony, would you recommend transmuting all of your jewels on those frequently used sets to be the same, and then just changing out the enchants? Or is it really so specialized that each one you'll have to make your own decisions about the trait for the jewelry and the enchants?
That's up to personal preference. You're not going to be really penalized if you decide to go 3 harmony versus 3 infused. If you did 1 infused, 1 harmony, 1 triune. It's completely up to personal preference. Like, for example, I always do 3 infused. And then if I'm an Argonian, I'll switch the enchants to a potion cooldown. If I want anything else, any other race, I'll have magic.
Hmm.
Just change out those enchants. Whereas Sharp, for example, he likes to run 1 triune and 2 harmony. Because when he synergizes, it's big burst of his resources and his health. So it's kind of a give or take. Like if you wanted to be able to be self-reliant and be able to spam heals if you need to, infuse is a good route. If you're that, depend on the healers a little bit more. You trust them to have the shards and all that ready for you. So if you did, Harmony is definitely a good choice. And then Triune if you want just higher stats all around. Is also a good choice. I don't really know of anyone else that uses any other transmuting.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I noticed that on my DK, a ton of my skills that are most frequently used, whether it be talons or chains, whatever, things that you're going to use frequently. I'm finding that, like on the Alkash set, I'm running out of magicka like crazy. Is that a case where you would opt for more mag recovery on one set versus another? Or am I just overspamming?
That's one of the big reasons why I always go infused magic recovery.
Yeah.
Like buffed up my DK right now. 1900 mag recovery, which is even a little bit lower than what I like to do. And I do that because I like to go into a dungeon. I like to be able to put down blockade, chain in a bunch of things, and talents everything. Like spam it, talents until everything's dead, and then move on, kind of thing. So that's like where it comes down to personal preference. But I assume your recovery is like 1100 or something.
Let's just say that. Yeah, it's at 1250.
Yeah, so even having it up to like 1700, 1800
Yeah,
buffed is a huge help.
I think so.
Like, that's my favorite thing to do, is to have like 2k mag recovery. Makes it very easy to chain things, to spam heals,
Right.
be like self-sufficient.
And I'm not noticing a problem with my stam or stam recovery, so that's why I wondered, is it okay to get more mag recovery?
Totally, so like, definitely mag recovery. Like,
So,
it totally is preference. So, like, if you prefer harmony, or using a shard and it giving you back everything, all your mag, all your stamina, all your mag.
and what about these newfangled jewelry glyph tri-stat recovery glyphs, prismatic? Yeah, is it just, I know, right? I mean, it doesn't seem like there's very much per. You'd have to get 2 per to equal 1.
Generally speaking, well, like, even it's a lot of everyone would be a vampire tank, but you have almost no recovery. Like health recovery, so don't even bother with that. But it's changed now, because vampires shouldn't be a vampire tank. That's just the cost.
Right. Well, with sugar skulls, you have.
Tank, you're probably going to want to cure your stuff.
So with the mag recovery, there's the jewelry and chance for mag recovery, and your mundus for mag recovery. So beyond that, do you just have divines on some of your armor, or how do you further increase your mag recovery?
If you use the choice tab potion, that gives you 20% to all your recoveries. So that'll increase it by a couple hundred. And then having, like, I run 7 sturdy. I don't run divines.
Mm-hmm.
It's just personal preference as well. But yeah, having the potion active, like fully buffed, any like mag recoveries you have going, potions, it stacks up to about 2k. Like Nightblade's a little bit higher. I think Nightblade is like 21. But the rest of my tunes are all about 2k.
That's probably champion points also?
Yes. Oh yeah, I mean it's a little bit higher. And then I'm also running like all the points to increase mag recovery.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like 100 points into Canis. Oh no, 75 there. That's what I have to do as well. Alright, so alright, yeah, so the next thing I was going to discuss was about armor. Generally speaking, you want at least 4 sturdy pieces of your body pieces. If you're going to do some non-sturdy, it's better to keep the big pieces. Because if you're going to do reinforced, or if you do get a bigger bonus versus having gloves, if you made your gloves sturdy, it's going to be 4%. Reduced cost of and then if you're going to do your chest sturdy, it'll be 4% as well. So, but if you're going to do reinforced gloves, it's only going to give you a couple, like at most 100 extra resistance, whereas if you do reinforced chest, it'll be 500-600. Yeah, so normally I'll try and go at least 4 sturdy. Especially if you're taking certain vet trials, you will have issues because certain trials require you to hold aggro on 5 or 6 different things at a time. Sometimes even up to, 15, 20, depending on the other tank that you're taking a trial with. And if you don't have that kind of reduced cost too, then you'll have a lot of issues. Getting aggro, not dying, and not moving stamina. Some tanks will go 5 into reinforced or 2 infused. I always go 7, just because I don't like to run out of stamina.
Yeah, see, that's what I was gonna ask.
It's when you're gonna get a hit and you're gonna die.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna. I've seen a lot of people, they go off of Mage, but I've seen a lot of people run a lot of their abilities off of Stamina.
Yes, so like blocking, while you're blocking, you're losing stamina. So it's that, and while you're blocking, your stamina does not recover at all. So I'm the type that stand in front of a boss and block. Then when I need to debuff, I'll bar swap, debuff, I'll hold and block, and then swap back, just in case. There are tanks that'll go in, they'll pierce, they'll do other skills, they'll heavy attack, block when they see the boss swing heavy kind of thing. It's all personal preference as well. The potions normally use are tripod pots. I'll just look at for if you're going to do that content, or if you're going to do content that you think you might have difficulty tanking. Because it will help. So that's it. So it's made bug loss called Dragonthorn. So if you're looking at it now, you can see it gives you health recovery, magic recovery, stamina, whatever.
And how does that compare with Crown? How does that compare with Crown?
It gives you no recovery. So it'll give you about the same health, about the same mag, and about the same stamp, but no recovery. But having that extra recovery does make a big difference, especially in the magic. So it ends up being a couple extra magic. For Mundus, I don't know any tanks that do not use That's kind of just been how it is for a long time. I know if you that I've gone more health. Magicka is definitely my favorite because it just makes it easier, I feel. So the bosses will have certain animations as well. Normally they'll have two different mechanics where I guess it's clean. So let's see what a heavy looks like. It'll boss or enemy. I have like these flashy yellow mines coming up from their those attacks when they're coming have to block. If you do not block it, it's gonna probably kill you. Especially that content. That content will for sure kill you. Whereas normal, it probably won't. But it becomes very important to block those heavy attacks. Have the yellow flash on them. As a tank as well, your job is to bash any mechanics that what you're tanking is doing. So certain times you'll have bosses or enemies, they'll stop and they'll start flashing red. It'll be similar to the yellow animation, but just red lines coming from. That means they're channeling and they have to be bashed. And not bashing could be anything. It could be a kill someone, it could be kills you. Just different things. So just make sure that you're ready to block those yellow attacks and then bash the red ones.
Can you bash and interrupt a heavy attack? You can't, can you?
Bashing is a thing you won't do. You should. I've known tanks in the past that'll spam bash, and then they're out of stamina, and then they take a heavy and get one-shotted. So it's kind of one of those things that wait for the mechanic. If it's a bash mechanic, you bash, and that's it. You don't do it any other time, really. At least for myself, it feels like it doesn't do any damage. Tank, because tanks don't do damage. It's just a given. So there's no point wasting stamina. Yeah, but heavies definitely you have to or dodge roll. But you do have to be careful with dodge rolling because sometimes you have to animations will be slower for certain enemies versus other ones. So some enemies will be a very quick animation. And if you don't time the dodge roll right, it will still kill you. And certain veg rolls as well. Like Zamaja in Discar. Her heavy attack is not dodgeable, and a lot of tanks think it is. So they'll try and dodge roll and it'll kill them in their dodge roll. It's kind of a thing you can do, but it's usually not the best choice. And there are certain bosses as well that if you dodge roll they're heavy, they'll just keep spamming the heavy over and over. What's that? Trout. Kind's Aegis. Last boss. It's one of the bosses where you dodge roll and he'll keep spamming heavy until it can actually fall through.
And talk about, if you would, the difference between a heavy with yellow lines and an interruptible attack with red lines.
Yeah. I guess a heavy you just block, and the interrupt you could bash. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, just letting people know that when you see the red lines, it's your job, if you're up against the boss, it's your job to bash them.
Yeah, and then bash is just L2, press R2. Which, if you're tanking, chances are you're going to be holding L2 already anyways. So it's just kind of a quick R2 tap and you're done. Also, your screen will kind of vibrate when it falls through. Just try and make sure for that, because a lot of the time lately you can spam bash. Sometimes you'll be in content, you'll spam bash 5-6 times before it actually goes through. Not sure why. I think it's just some sort of glitch. Yes. So tanking is a lot about the boss mechanics and position. You always want to turn things around. You do not want to lose aggro at any point, unless you're coordinating with another tank to swap aggro. That's pretty much a rule. Wiping the group and killing everybody in one hit, because it does happen. So it's generally, I'll kind of keep an eye on the timers, so when it appears.
Yeah, he's got a few of them. I think, there's a trial dummy back here.
Oh yeah.
Hey, Blacks, real quick, I was gonna ask you, do you use both bars when you tank?
Yes.
And you just slot, sword and board on both?
I always do sword and board on front bar. Back bar, I'll do either lightning staff or ice staff. That's because another thing that is the tank's job is to debuff. About a year ago, they changed enchants. They work with one-handed and two-handed weapons. So sword and board, when you do a sword and board skill, it would apply your enchant at full damage, or full debuff, I guess you could say. Whereas they changed it about a year ago, where you have to use a two-handed skill to get full enchant. So a lot of tanks will uninfused a crusher enchant. That's one of the main tank debuffs. That weapon. So whenever it's blockade, that'll apply that debuff on enemy and as you keep that blockade up, it'll keep applying that debuff. And the DPS will depend on that debuff to get the most damage they can. So definitely a two-handed, either staff, any staff but resto. Resto you can use, but there aren't really any skills that'll apply the debuffs that you need them to. So a lot of it's just healing skills, which will apply your crusher enchant. Tanks I always or two-hand. It's definitely an option, but I don't like to because I notice a lot of the skills will use stamp. It's a resource I don't really want to use. Sorry.
No, sorry, I tried to interrupt you. But what about the frost staff? You don't use it to pull aggro at all? It's not recommended.
Frost staff will add slow. So whenever you use blockade, it'll slow everything. There's soft aggro and hard aggro. So, say I was in a dungeon with 3 other people. If I'm in the front and I apply damage before anyone else, everything will target me first, usually. It's not always a sure thing. I've seen things like turn around and times first, but generally rule of thumb is if you run into a dungeon, see a mob of enemies, quick blockade, everything's kind of looking at you, they're going to move towards you, run around, pierce each one, like aggro each one, chain in the enemies or the ranged animation.
Well, with the ice staff too, it's a tri-room. You can turn that off right at where heavy attack aggroes. You just have to not put any skill points into that I forget what it's called.
I think it's the first. It's passive stuff. Yeah, try focus. There's some tanks that'll use that as aggro, like use that for aggro. It's up to you, but if you're off tanking a trial and the other tank has the boss, and you need a magicka back, and you decide to heavy attack the boss, it's gonna turn around and hit you. So it's up to you. I like the animation for the lightning staff because you know it's connected. You get your resources back. The ice staff will add some resistance while you're blocking them. So it's completely up to you if you feel like you want that extra survivability on your back bar, staff bar, or if you prefer a lightning staff, it's completely up to you. Healers should be running a lightning staff back bar and applying blockade as well. And having that off balance, because blockade with the lightning staff will apply off balance here and there. So, if you decide to go ice staff, you don't have to worry about missing on that. It's because the healer should be applying that. So it's completely your choice. Does that help?
Yeah, definitely, thank you.
I wondered that too, because I was seeing people requesting lightning over ice staffs when they're doing gear runs, and I wondered about that. Is that otherwise? Okay, so there's not a best. It's up to you.
Looking at the passives in the destruction staff, with an ice staff you get extra resistance when you're blocking. You heavy attack aggro.
Which is helpful because even if you don't have, even if you're spending more time in your front bar, there's still going to be oh shit moments where you're going to want to block on your back bar, right? So it can be helpful.
Yeah, especially like I like to run chains on my black bar. So sometimes in a boss fight, I'll have to chain in some enemies so they get burned down. It's a good option in case you see an enemy trying to heavy attack you. Block it, you don't have to burst one. Nice staff, whereas with a lightning staff, you're probably safer to swap because it might kill you.
Yeah. For mob fights too, the ice staff blockade slows the bad guys too, right? So that's, if you're looking for that.
It'll slow, and it could freeze twice, I believe. So it definitely does help. But yeah, it's definitely down to personal preference as well.
But I mean,
Lightning a little bit better. I definitely feel safer with lightning staff.
But you have to get your passives up to get a 50% bonus, right?
I think it's 36% damage. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to. It's ancient knowledge. It's the second last skill. So it increases the damage you can block and reduces the cost of block as well.
but the certain board still.
Yeah, this is just for back bar. Front bar is definitely stick with different board.
Okay.
Your main taunt is a super skill. Which would be Puncture, Pierce, or Ransack. Which one you decide to go with. But that's your main go-to aggro skill. Whereas Inner Fire, which is in Undaunted skill line, it's called Inner Rage. So Inner Fire.
I think Inner Fire's the more.
That's your range taunt. So if there's something you don't want to sword, you can taunt it from range. If it's melee, you'll usually or it'll start hitting you if it's ranged. It's usually a good habit to ask the group if they're ready before aggroing. Especially if you're in a trial situation. A lot of the time, if the group isn't ready, you'll have like 4 or 5 people in the back dead or doing nothing. But yeah, that's actually a good idea. Usually you can do callouts as a tank. Want the crown to lead the trial. Just crown is arranged in the trial, let them lead it. And then you can discuss with them if they want you to do callouts. See if it's for the group or not. It's super important to always stay calm when you're taking. Generally speaking, like if I panic, I die. So I just try and remain calm, keep an eye on your resources, make sure that stamina doesn't get too low, and if it does, if you have to heavy, just always try and do that heavy attack after the boss does a hit. Because generally they won't spam their heavy attack over and over, especially if you block. So it's usually the best chance to do it. Yeah. When you're learning to tank, I think I posted this before in an episode, but if you're below CP 160, you can run Torogs in a set of your choice that's crafted. To reach 160, I normally farm Ebon. So Ebon is usually needed in trials groups, and it's a dungeon set, so it's usually quite easy to get a group to farm it. Whereas trial sets are a little bit, such as Yomik, Alkosh, especially Alkosh. And yeah, once you have those Ebon body pieces, you can run Torogs, weapons and rolls, and then work towards getting Alkosh, weapons and rolls. It's when I learn to tank new content, I have a tendency to just taunt the boss and hold block, not even debuff or anything like that. It's not a good habit to have, but it's very important that the tank stays alive and holds aggro, even more important than debuffing. So you have to really pick your times when you debuff, or apply your other skills to a boss, because if you do it at the wrong time, you'll die. So yeah, so that can be an option for you. If you're tanking something new, don't be afraid to run up, puncture, pierce, ransack, whatever, hold block, and just stand there and do that the entire time. Don't let your resources run out. And then self-heal as you need it. And then as you become more experienced in content, you can run up, pierce, start your rotation, have like a debuff rotation, arcane, talons for maim, or what's it? Rogue slash, maybe this one. And then just whatever stone fist if you're on DK, which is one of the main debuffs for DK. And then you have some other skills, or then you'd have the Fletchers, and so forth. In order to get better at tanking, the way I learned was I would go into dungeons. I'd find a 4-man group that I like grouping with, 2 DPS and a healer, and we'd try and go almost every night. We'd go and do pledges or a couple dungeons on vet. Pledge is always a good choice because you can go in on vet, and the first 2 pledges are usually number 1s or number 2s. Number 1s, it's a good challenge, and then number 2s are a bit more difficult, so you kind of work your way up, is how I learned. Do number 1s, number 2s, and then I'd start working on DLC at dungeons, and then start doing hard modes. you could put trials anywhere in there. Your Pragmorn trials are a little bit more difficult than tanking about a number 2 event dungeon. Whereas the other trials are a little bit harder. So it's, if you're having difficulty with it, depending on the content, you can definitely feel free to go back, you know, try those dungeons again. Mechanics, a lot of the mechanics are repeated. Certain dungeons will have repeated mechanics from trial bosses. So, and then just also becoming comfortable on your tank, not being afraid to not die and learn the mechanics of that. It's always good to have some sort of heal tank. If you're on a DK, you're gonna have what's that? Coagulating blood? No.
Green Dragon.
Green Dragon blood. Sorry. Dragon blood, which is a very good strong heal. If you play DK, it's always a good idea to let your health get low before using a Dragon blood. It heals based off of your missing health. So you definitely want to let it get low before you burst it back up. If I spammed it at 80% health, it'll be like a 3 or 4% heal. Whereas if I use it at 20 to 30% health, it'll be almost my entire health bar. So that's like a good method for sustain on a DK. Warden will have Arctic Blast or Arctic Winds. It's a super strong heal and it's super cheap. So it's, especially if you have high mag, you can spam it in all situations. Necro will have the same. Nightblade's a little bit different. They have no burst heals on a tank. So you'd have to keep like about 4 or 5 skills up, which will constantly heal you. Need it or not. So Sork, run the clan farm. It's a really strong heal. It's really cheap. Let's see other classes. Templar, they don't make good trials tanks. You can do Templar tank on normal. It becomes very difficult on the content. I've tried it a bunch of times. I've always had stam sustain issues on them. Especially boss fights. If you're in a mob fight, you can just use Repentance. It'll give you back pretty much all your stam. But on a boss fight, especially if it's a long fight, run out of stam. Templars usually. And then as well, their heals are very magicka based. So having a health with a lot of max health will not produce a strong magicka heal. So works well on mag, but not on a tank. Any questions so far? One of your main tank. Alright, so I guess I'll go with the skills now. It's good to have burst heal like we just talked about. Nightblade will have ticking heals. All other classes will have some sort of burst. We can go into more of that if there's any questions once we get to the classes. Yeah, so one of burst ticking heals Nightblade. You want aggressive warlord, which is in the assault skill line. It's it's a bit of work to get it, but it's a must for a tank, especially if you're going to be tanking trials, because the group will keep needing more points between all the support. So whatever trait and enchant that you want. I went defending. I like to go defending, because I like to max out my resistance to 33k. I know a lot of tanks that'll run 28k even in trials, buffed, and they have no issues. So it's completely personal preference. I usually do defending and then absorb stamina. So because Puncture Pierce is a sort of skill, you apply your enchant. Enchants aren't cooldown as well. I think it's a 5-second cooldown. So those enchant will be going off every 5 seconds, but it will be going off, so you don't have to worry about using your sword enchant. Back bar, I like to go Fuse Crusher enchant. And that'll apply one of the major debuffs that you want. Besides your fracture, like pierce or puncture, that's your next biggest debuff, as well as Alkosh proc. Slash is also another good skill. Into Bone Slash, which gives you ultimate, and it also applies a debuff to the boss. Not every tank uses it. It's definitely a good skill. It does use stamps, you have to use it somewhat sparingly. You should have all the heavy armor passes, those are super important. As well as your sword and board passes. Those are what keep you alive. If you're on sword and board and you have no passives, you'll die just as if you had a staff. Whereas if you have all those passives, you have sustain as well as another good skill to have is guard. You have to use it often. It's in the support skill line, so that's part of Cyrodiil as well. It's the third skill down. You won't need it often, but there will be certain situations where you should use it. If you're tanking VSS last boss, Sunspire on vet, last boss, if you're off tanking, you'll have to guard the main tank. So that's a good skill to level up. Even before it's morphed, it's still very good. It reduces their damage taken by 30%. It gives it to you instead while you're guarding them. That's one of the skills you will have to do on bar. Kind of like a pet. If you bar swap, if you had guard on your front bar, you used it on someone, bar swapped, it'll break. Fine. Guard won't be applied anymore. So you gotta double bar it and be careful not to press the skill to deactivate it.
And how does it work? Is it any ally? So therefore the tank should be taking the most damage, it will automatically go to that person?
Yeah, so like you can see Mimus is doing it on Sephiroth now. So that means any damage Sephiroth takes, 30% of it will go to Mimus instead. Is that what you're asking?
So how did they link with each other is what I don't get.
It says skill you use.
Oh, you can use it on another player.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
So
you
got
use
you.
the skill on another player.
Got you.
You target
Can
the
you
other
hide?
player.
Yeah, you yell at them. Yeah, you have to aim at the player to activate it, or...
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to be looking at them.
Got you.
So wherever you're looking at, you use it, and then it'll stick on them as long as you don't move too far away. So you can see as we moves further, line will get thinner, and then it'll eventually break. Have to run up and reapply it and stay within distance to keep it active. It's not used often. I think it's only used usually in like 2 or 3 trials, which would be VSS. VSS, even like the beginning bosses, sometimes he'll literally use it on the main tank. And yeah. sometimes as a tank you can guard a healer. The healers have difficulty staying alive in certain content as well. It's just definitely a good skill to have to be able to use, especially if you're progging something. So most classes will have either one or a few debuffs. There are a few classes that don't have any. Sword Tank doesn't really have any debuffs, like class debuffs. But Templar Tank will have Power the Light. Warden will have Fletchers. DK will have Stone Fist. Uses Stam, so it's very hard to master. It does apply a really big debuff to whatever you're hitting with it, but you have to stand 3 times for it. So it can be really stam heavy. So kind of more of a debuff for more experienced tanks. If you don't have a mag decaying group, the tank, as a DK tank, you will be expected to use Fiery Breath. It'll be much less of a debuff than a mag decay running it, but sometimes you'll be asked to use that just for that little bit of buff. Are there any other questions about skills?
So with the debuffs, there are some that stack and some that don't.
Yes. So generally the rule of thumb is if it's not called something, it'll stack with other things that are similar. So certain item sets, I'm trying to think of examples. Alkosh? So if you're looking at the 5-piece of Alkosh that I look at, it applies. So you can see reduces physical and spell resistance of any enemy hit by 3,110 for 2 seconds. That's the debuff that you're looking to apply with Alkosh. If you notice, it doesn't have a name. It doesn't say Major Ward, Major Ally, or anything like that, or Fracture or Breach. So since it's not a named debuff, it'll be kind of separate from everything else, so it will stack.
Okay.
For Alkosh in general, it'll apply the bigger debuff, so both tanks are using it, and they synergize at the same time. Whichever debuff is bigger will apply, the other one will just be ignored. So Alkosh will not stack with Alkosh kind of thing. And a lot of other sets as well. They won't stack on top of each other, especially if they're debuff sets. So if you're running 2 DPS and more of Tongs, they're not going to stack. 2 tanks in Alkosh, it'll be whichever one's stronger or better at the time will apply, the other won't be ignored.
So like the Dragon's Defilement set, it says Minor Fracture and Minor Breach, but if there's already something else applying those, then it doesn't do anything. Well, okay.
So if you're those running, what's it called? Some Pierce Armor? Yeah, Pierce Armor. So if you're running that, if you look at that skill, Major Fracture, Major Breach. So physical resistance reduced by 5280. So if your set says it does Major Fracture, Major Breach, it's not going to stack with Pierce, because it already applies that debuff. So it won't apply that debuff twice. That answer.
Yeah.
Any other questions about the skills? I guess I'll quickly touch on classes. Normally speaking, the most popular, easiest tank class is definitely DK. With DKs, whenever you use an ultimate, there's a passive that will give you back resources whenever you use an ultimate. So that's another resource thing. And as tanking, your main goal is to keep your health up and high, and keep your resources from running out. Your magicka can run out, it's not a big deal. Stam, you do not want that to run out. So having you ever use an ultimate give you back mag, stam, and health, it's super helpful. As well, they have another passive that whenever you use skills from a certain tree, one of the main skills of DKs will be ignis. And that, whenever you use that, it costs mag, and it gives you back some stam. It's not very much, but it's enough to make a difference. So out of all the classes, DK definitely has the best stamina sustain. And heals are pretty... They're, the second most popular class would be Horde. They also have very good stamina sustain. Need Bull Netch a lot of the time, which having a skill that gives you back stam while you're holding block is a huge bonus. So having that Bull Netch up will give you stam, and that helps a lot with stamina sustain. And the heals are very good. So it's skill Julian. Arctic something. It's the first skill, not a skill.
I don't know either. I don't look. Hold on.
Blast or wind or something.
Polar wind.
Polar wind.
Yeah.
Alright. That's a very good heal on a tank. It's really cheap and it heals a lot. And you don't have to worry about being low in health. You can spam it if you want. So for a warden, that's a very good self-heal. Sorcerer, that's my favorite tank. It's not popular. And it's not as good as DK or Warden, but there's a skill, it's called Bound Aegis. Whenever you take a heavy, if you use that skill just before it, it'll reduce the damage you take from that heavy by, I believe it's 40%, which is huge. So something that will normally almost kill you through a block, that you tank and you block it. On Sorka, if you time it right, it'll do only half your damage, which definitely helps with your mag sustain and self-heals and all that. So that's one thing I like about Sorka, and it's kind of like a little fun minigame. Trying to time it right every time. The Sork tank also, you can have infinite sustain with it. So a certain build where you would have running balance, which is Mage's skill, gives you your 5280 resistance buff, as well as will give you a bunch of mag. What do you? Oh no, a bunch of mag. It uses 5k health. Activate. So use that. Gives you back mag.
I dare say.
And then there's a sword skill called Dark Exchange. Cost mag and it'll give you back stam. So between those two skills, you can have infinite sustain. You never really have to rely on pods or shards or anything like that. But you have to be very careful on Sword Tank because that Dark Deal skill drop your block. And if you take a heavy at the wrong time, it'll kill you.